Answers of an Alien from Andromeda, Video 159, January, 2019. Hi my friends. A lot of work and little time for dear friends. The warehouse located in North America for shipment of cargo and people to the colony of Mars has been very busy during this period. It seems that something is being decided at the last minute by the colony's coordinators. Pleiadians and Arcturians are making sure that no nuclear weapons are transferred among other warlike technologies to Mars, as the reptilian colony was formally summoned by the CG not to receive such materials at its base there. Mars is governed by a resolution, just like in Antarctica, which says the non-installation of war material by none of the races that have bases there. The only weaponry allowed is those installed on spacecraft as standard by some races, and are weapons of energy, not nuclear fission. Questions. Mithy, on the mission sent to the Moon, you have already said that none of the announced astronautics were there, but why all the rock samples that was said as Moon rocks brought in up to the Apollo 17 period were all proven to be false? Did not those who were there before Apollo 17 collect real samples to bring? Look David, it may be rude to say this to some, but the truth is that the missions that actually went to the Moon positioned instruments, reflectors, and made rock and substrate analyses, as well as sent analysis results and radio photos of bases and objects found. But all the bodies of those who voluntarily went on these missions remain on the surface of the Moon to this day. These missions were only one way, had no ability to take off and much less return. The only mission that was developed with some technology that allowed for the return of astronauts and some cargo was the mission that you called Apollo 20. Taking advantage of the fact that we are talking about the Moon, it is recently being experimentally repositioned to compensate the Earth for the orbital rearrangement that is happening in the solar system, to compensate for the new Venus orbit, and to finalize the Taurus orbit among some other celestial bodies that will be included as elements peripherals. The angular change of the orbital plane of the Moon relative to the Earth is clear and easily observable by you. Thrusters are being used for these repositioning, and you may see strong light at specific points where some of them are installed, pulses of energy that may occur several times in the same places on the visible side of the Moon too. Mithy, is it true that China landed a probe on the opposite side of the Moon and released a rover for exploration and scientific testing? Jerry, they actually landed a probe there with some outside tech help. But the images that were released are all false, maybe not to divulge what they think is very strange for the general population. You can be sure that all the photos that allegedly show nothing beyond the horizon are false. The excuse that the local luminosity does not let the sky be captured is a total untruth. The photos, according to the equipment you currently have, should show the Moon as in the assemblies that be gently attached to illustrate how we see the lunar horizon whenever we are there. Anything other than that which is presented to you is shamefully false. Of course, not coincidentally, that mentioned Chinese probe that was sent to the other side of the Moon also like a mission of observation of these maneuvers that are happening at the moment. Mithy, I read Stefan Dennard's book, where he tells that he had met people from the planet Arga. He communicated with them and saw holographic views of their planet. Could this be true? Well, nostalgia sometimes happens, the mental connection with some race observing something nearby. But it isn't possible to define origin by the random name of the planet, and, if it is based on the design of the race provided, I can assure that none reptilian breed has ears, and I do not know any humanoid race with these characteristics, so the deception was initiated by that fact. Mithy, if the Earth is gradually increasing in diameter and mass, why aren't sea levels dropping and the days getting longer? Are we still in the first stages of this process, or are there balancing forces in action? See Sichi, an important detail. The Earth is increasing only in volume, not in mass. As materials melted at high temperatures approach the surface, they dilate, absorb gases, and become porous when they cool. Therefore, since the mass remains the same, there is no significant change in the momentum that could change the rotational time period of the planet. Oceanic levels may rise or fall depending on the increase or reduction of dry areas that may rise or fall according to the tectonic pressures formed in the process. Mithy, you were talking about the new species of plants and animals, which will appear on our planet in the nearest future. Can you describe some plant or animal which was transferred here already, but was not discovered by our scientists yet? Thank you. Pavel, your question is more complex than you think. The races that take care of the planet's wildlife balance versus environmental frequency range from bacteria needed to destroy certain pollution, to new animals, insects and plants that will provide the biological balance, and everything depends on the moment. At this time the planet is very biologically unbalanced and shock treatments will be administered to gradually return to normal. They work with very complex equations and only they know the sequence they should use once analyzed the environment in question. We know that a lot is being done and reformulated but have no subsidies to inform you of details of what is being done at the moment. Mithy, about the biomechanical units that were left to protect certain areas and prevent access. Can these units harm someone or even take a life? What will they do if you wander too close out of curiosity? What will they do if someone tries to force their way through? Why not just use a force field? Shine, the biomechanical units are self-regenerative, can only be destroyed or disabled by the one who created them. When these ancient artifacts or laboratories are extracted and removed by the Arcturians or other races involved in the cleaning, these units are isolated and specific techniques of the constructor races are required for their deprogramming. For thousands of years non-humanoid races have wanted to get their hands on certain types of genetic laboratories of humanoid races, and this was an installed protection to really ward off undesirables in those places. With a weapon of modern energy these laboratories and their biomechanical units could be pulverized without problems, but those who wish to take advantage of these studies and techniques try to obtain non-destructive access for this purpose. Whoever burns his hand in the fire and continues to try and burn himself to death, cannot blame the fire, but yes his own stupidity in not understanding that it does not belong to him and that it will never be accessible to him without a consent. Dear Mithy, can you provide additional info to what these races and spaceship are originated from and what they were doing here and why they let themselves be captured by video so clear and so often? Thanks in advance. See Rene Alejandro, many races use triangle-shaped service ships, about 12 circulating here through the system, but what you consider to be alien heads appearing is totally out of proportion for this type of spacecraft. It's more for a entry and exit of search probes. The aliens in this type of spacecraft would be very small proportionally so they could be seen. Mithy, when entering galactic community, how has societies with many religious beings like ours reacted to new knowledge that contradicts their whole set of beliefs and what is the strangest deity you had opportunity to encounter? Yuval, you did a satire on a movie that CB lent us long ago, where a civilization lived in a closet, revered a certain K, and Agent K introduced Agent Partner J as the new responsible, and they immediately revered with Sov J the new one presented. It's somewhat similar. When someone with a lot of knowledge comes up to help solve problems in practice rather than theory, people quickly realize that their ancient deities were anachronistic. They will open their eyes to the reality of the universe instead of believing in miracles invented by their old religious sects. And from there they will be free to develop their own consciences without believing that praying could be forgiven by some fantastic and powerful figure. I already had the opportunity to be in the same environment with beings level 8 and 9, and for me, if the word deity has any meaning, they were very close to the divine. Mithy, in the last 158 video you said that people on Mars are using technologies that are 60 years ahead of Earth. Can you tell in more detail which ones for example? Roman, these are many details. For example, batteries that last for many years without recharge, digital quantum hybrid computers and mobile phones, locomotion vehicles with anti-gravity, transmission of electric energy through the air between binary transmitters, energy cutting and drilling equipment, medical centers of regeneration, cloning of already acclimatized animals, including plants, birds and fish. This is just a commentary on hundreds of invents developed here on Earth and suppressed from its implantation here. Mythi, with what technology do you change the DNA of living beings and how does this happen? When will we have such advanced technologies in contrast to today's? Very interesting to know. Maxid, we do not play with DNA. There are processes that allow the natural adjustment of DNA to the environment in which the being in question will have to survive. The genome is inherent in the gradual development of a particular race, characteristics, adaptations, etc., and adjustments can be made so that its generations are more adapted to the chosen environment for a new colonization. Currently all adjustments in colonizing races pass through the CG scientific screen and are implemented under license. There are specialized and accredited CG breeds to process adaptive changes in wildlife, flora, insects and microorganisms. Mythi, are the chocolate hills in Bohol, Philippines actually pyramids? Who made them? A gem, well, I can tell you that they are not natural formations, nor are they pyramids in the design of energy concentrators. Let's say that region was used for many millennia as a scrapyard for many battles that have happened here on the planet since 500 million years ago. Much is buried there, but they do not represent a danger of contamination or reactivation, so they must be left there being consumed by the chemical processes of that soil. Who are the giant humanoids revealed in this massive Ecuadorian artificial cave? Gravity on Earth must have been much lower to accommodate 7-meter-tall individuals. The evidence appears indisputable. Passages like this extended for hundreds of miles under the soils of Ecuador and Peru. Paul, this race of tall humanoids for many millennia live on a planet in the constellation Pleiades. They had a colony here that was to some extent very active and innovative. Among males and females the height median was 3.5 meters, but there were elements up to 5 meters high between them. They were responsible for repeatedly preventing the planet's attempt to become a reptilian colony, fought great battles, repulsing fleets of reptilian hunters of planets. The hundreds of miles of deep caves and extensive ramifications built by them have always led them to victory in battles fought. They were in many parts of the planet because they had ships and aircraft that allowed them to explore and map the planet. A curiosity and general knowledge for you. When Admiral Perry Race redesigned several maps more than 500 years ago, he relied on stray maps of this race of giants that went astray in their wanderings in present-day Europe thousands of years earlier when Stonehenge was raised among other similar constructions to aid in landing and take off from their old ships of service. A few thousand years ago they decided to call for their mother civilization to be rescued and to leave the planet, since hundreds of humanoid colonizations were implanted here by several other races making their lives here less viable. At the time of the pre-Incas they began migrating to a new planet 8 times larger than the Earth discovered by their mother race during that period. Mythi, are you aware of this artifact, known by us as the Betz Sphere, and are you able to indicate how it malfunctioned? What was its purpose and final fate? Mike, this is an old probe, the kind that followed and watched squadrons of airplanes during your World War II, that for some reason lost some of its directions of return and ended up staying in the field. Being an autonomous and inviolable unit, its loss was not a major problem for researchers who were probably using hundreds of them for scientific surveys in the region. Certainly the military stole it and tried in vain to analyze its quantum material programmed or the interior totally inviolable. The probe is probably in some of the military deposits of disaffected. Mythi, can we conclude that our known universe covered by all CGs is fairly central to the rest of the unexplored regions and possibly further along technologically? Is the first ideal areas to seed life in a new universe more centralized to its overall expansion? Friend, I understood your question, but in reality it does not serve as a rule of development for a universe. In the case of a universe, it is not really an ovoid as you represent it, it has thousands of interconnected ramifications that do not obey the geometric vision conjectured by you. If you pour water into a sand basin, it does not matter if you start throwing water by the edge or the center, the water will wet all the sand exactly in the same time period and in the same proportion water x sand, because what counts is the porosity of the sand to accommodate the water, whether the sand is punched in some parts or loose in others. So regardless of the initial location of CG coverage, the coverage time will be a progression driven by our ability to partner more so that we can cover more and more in less time. Mithy, technically what is it your team does in order to reconstruct trajectories and reframe lives to be successful in the mission where each came to fulfill? Well, Abraham, what is given to all is the opportunity to fit into what you feel vocation and pleasure to do. It is up to each individual to find himself in these tendencies. No one can reconstruct trajectories or reformulate the lives of others, for each is each one. All different but united by some common ideal. What is done is to provide the means necessary, respecting differences, that each one can follow his own guidelines focused as much as possible on the common good. Mithy, what are the reptilians' plans anytime in the future with those whom they brought to Mars during period of bad weather as mentioned in past now that the party is over? Was it convenient for them to explore Mars as long as they wish so to build a base to house the selected? Pan, reptilians intend to maintain a joint venture with this humanoid colony, since they can always learn by osmosis human behavior and thereby maintain a testing ground on the possibility of a social association between cultures. I sincerely hope this is a way of whoever knows, to be one of the first pillars of understanding the differences between races and the development of peaceful coexistence and mutual learning. Generations will succeed and this will show if there will be a possibility of a truly peaceful and constructive coexistence or if they will inevitably be separated by lack of compatibility. All I can say is that it will be a very interesting observation. It is good to have talked again with so many friends, and keep observation in the skies. You have the privilege of participating in a historical reconfiguration in your solar system, and even if your governments want to keep them blindfolded, you know very well how to observe the events without their sieve. Everyone stay well.